How's it going, guys? It's your boy Mike from Seattle, and today we're going to be watching and discussing a video from Biggerpockets by one of their contributors named Dave Meyer. And his video talks about how a cash-on-cash return is not the best metric that you can use to determine the value or productivity of one of your rental properties. He instead likes the return on equity metric. So we're going to watch his video, watch his discussion. I've got it sped up to 1.5 times speed so we can get through it quicker. It's only going to be an 8-minute video, and we're just going to pause here or there to discuss what he's saying and talk about it a little bit. I'm going to give my thoughts on it. For those of you who are new to my channel, maybe haven't seen me before, I own 8 units. I have 6 total properties, 2 duplexes, 4 single-family homes, 1 duplex in Seattle, and then 5 more pieces of real estate in the Midwest. I've been investing in real estate for the last 4 years. I don't consider myself an expert, but I am somebody who has a little bit of experience. So I just wanted to give my thoughts on this because I personally use the cash-on-cash return method. Why don't we jump right into the video?
Most popular metrics in all of real estate investing. And there's a good reason, because it is a very easy and efficient way to learn how much cash flow your investment is generating for you. But I also think that cash-on-cash return happens to be one of the most overused metrics in all of real estate investing because it is only useful at a really specific period of time. So today I'm going to tell you all about a better metric for measuring your portfolio's performance called return on equity. Before we jump into this, I'm going to tell you a quick story from my own investing career and why this metric means so much to me. I started investing back in 2010, and I really had no idea what I was doing. I had never even heard of Biggerpockets. I sort of started investing somewhat on a whim, and luckily it worked out for me. And over the course of several years, my property value, which I had bought in Denver back in 2010, just kept going up and up and up. And if you know anything about the Denver market, that was a really good time to buy, and my equity just kept growing and growing and growing. And I was super content with this. I was calculating my cash on cash return, and look at this. I had invested X amount of dollars into this deal. My cash flow was going up and up and up, and my cash on cash return was getting even better, right? Not exactly, because all of that equity that I was building up in this property, I could have taken out of that deal and reinvested it. And if I had reinvested it more quickly, I would have generated better returns. I would have built my portfolio quickly. And instead, yeah, I had a really, really good deal, but I could have had maybe 2 or 3 really good deals. So I'm going to teach you all about this deal, return on equity, today, so you guys can avoid the same mistakes that I made and hopefully manage your portfolios a little bit better. Okay, so to get into the math and data behind this, I'm going to turn to my handy little digital whiteboard, and we're going to use a really simple example of a home that is purchased for $200,000. Now, if you are saying you can't buy a house for 200 grand anymore, that's probably true, but I'm just going to use really simple numbers here to make the math as easy as possible to follow. Let's assume in this deal that you're going to put 20% down, which means that you're going to invest $40,000 of cash, and then you're going to put $5K into closing costs and then $5K into rehab. So let's just say this is down, this is closing, and this is rehab, right? So that means that you've invested $50,000 into this deal. And let's just assume that you also have $5K in cash flow. So to calculate cash on cash returns, super easy. Again, one of the reasons it's so popular is because it's really easy. And if you're looking at a deal that you haven't bought yet and trying to figure it out, cash on cash return is a perfect metric to use. So let's say we have 5K divided by 50K. That equals a 10% cash on cash return. That would be really great in today's market, right? I would love if I could find some cash on cash returns for 10%. Not finding a lot in Denver. I don't know where you guys are investing. Hopefully you're having a little more success at cash flow there, but here's the deal. If you had a 10% cash on cash return and you just measured cash on cash going forward, it's probably going to go up, right? Rents are going up right now, and hopefully you are operating your business really efficiently and getting more and more cash flow out of it. And so it's going to be really tempting to look at cash on cash return because it always goes up and it makes you feel good about yourself. At least that's what happened to me. I kept doing that. But let's look at what happens 3 years from now, right? So let's just say that our cash flow went from 5% up to from $5,000 up to $6,000 per year. And so we are going to now calculate our cash on cash return. You know, cash on cash return equals now 6K divided by 50K. Because remember, with cash on cash return, we're only looking at the cash we invested. And so our cash flow has gone up to 12%. Just like I just said, over time, your cash on cash return is always going to go up unless something really bad happens. You have a lot of vacancy. Hopefully that's not happening to you. So you feel good about yourself, right? You have 12% cash on cash return. Wrong. You should be looking at this in a very different way. Because over the 3 years, you have probably built up equity in your home. And you do that 2 ways.
Okay, hold on. Before he gets any further into the math, I just want to agree with him. I agree with the way that he's running his numbers here. This is almost exactly the same story as the duplex that I bought back in 2018. Well, 3-4 years later, rents have been raised a couple of times. What used to rent for $1,600 a month now rents for $2,150 a month. My cash flow increases, my cash on cash return increases, and the equity in my duplex, I purchased it for $450,000, just did a appraisal a couple of weeks ago at $669,000 so I could get a home equity line of credit. That's $219,000 worth of appreciation in just a 3.5-year period. So now he's going to talk about how that equity I have built up isn't working for me in the best possible way, and so my cash on cash return isn't valid because really I'm missing out on an opportunity here to have my equity work harder for me. I'm going to let him explain.
value appreciates and you pay down your loan. So let's say that the property value is now $250K after 3 years. And let's calculate how much equity we have in the deal. And this equity, when I say equity, what I mean is how much money would you walk away with if you sold the deal today? And so you have 250. Originally, we took out a loan for $160,000. Remember, we borrowed we put down $40,000. We borrowed $160,000 for that $200,000 purchase. And so now let's just say we own $150. I didn't actually figure out what we would owe, but it would be around there. And so that would give us walking away with roughly $100K, but we have to pay our real estate commissions. 6% on 250K is $12K. And so now we're walking away with 88 grand. That's awesome, right? So that, I would argue, is the money that you have invested in the deal, not 50,000. You have 88,000 invested into the deal because if you sold it, you could go use that 88,000 somewhere else, right? You've just shown in your first deal that you could get a 10% cash on cash return. If you could still get a cash on cash return of 10% and you put your 88K down, you should be earning $8,800 per year in cash flow, right? A 10% cash on cash return on 88,000 invested is 8,800. But you are only generating 6K in this deal. And that means you're losing out on $2,800 a year in cash flow, which comes out to, I don't even know, I'm going to calculate that. 60. That is a 47%. You could be generating 47% more cash flow if you use that 88K. So that's how you have to think about it as an investor, because investing is all about taking your profits and reinvesting it as quickly as possible at high a rate of return. And by allowing this...
Okay, so here's where my point of contention is going to be. I don't disagree with him on the math. I don't even necessarily disagree with him on the principle. He is saying that, well, you have unused equity sitting there waiting for you to tap into it so that you can make a better return on that equity than just having it sitting locked up in a property. And I agree with him to a certain extent. You know, if I get asked the question, well, would you ever pay off one of your rentals completely? Ideally not, unless I need to free up mortgage slots so I can buy more rentals. I would rather not pay off a property completely because that equity sits there and I'm not using it to make the most of the money. I would rather pull it out and buy more rental property. So I do agree with him here on the principle. The problem is when you are telling this to a brand new real estate investor who maybe only has their first rental property or their second or their third, they're starting out, they're relatively new, you're encouraging them to take the maximum amount of risk and leverage as much as they can. Some would say over leverage. I would say leveraging more than is reasonable for a beginning investor. Look, if you have 100 different houses and you're noticing that 20 of them you have 80% equity in, and you want to start using this method to pull a bunch of that equity out and buy a ton more rentals and go from 100 houses to 200 houses, I completely support that decision, because for that person, they have so many rental properties, they have so much cash flow already that they can handle the expansion if some of those new properties don't pan out as well. Another point that he made here was he mentioned earlier, he was like, wow, I wish I could find a 10% cash on cash return. It's hard for me to find that in Denver anymore. Well, you know, I'm not going to be in a huge hurry to pull my money out of a guaranteed investment property and potentially create an alligator property, which is where you pull too much money out, your payment's too high, the rents can't cover it, and you end up going negative monthly on your property. It's an alligator property, as Michael Zuber talks about. I'm very hesitant to just pull money out for the sake of pulling money out. Now, if I have a bunch of 10% cash on cash return ready deals just sitting in my market that I could easily jump on and easily redistribute the money into to buy more, okay, that makes sense. If I have a good team and a good system and a good process set up that I'm comfortable with, I don't want to say over leveraging, but leveraging to a higher level than where you're currently at, that makes sense to me. I think this is great advice for that medium level real estate investor, someone who has probably 10 rentals or more. But I don't think this is a great piece of advice for somebody who's new, and it's certainly not for somebody who just has one. You know, if you're house hacking and have one duplex, do you really want to stretch yourself that much and risk the property that you even live in? Personally, I would say no. To each their own. We all have different tolerance levels. But myself, I would say be a little bit more cautious than this. Let's go ahead and let him continue.
Equity to build up in your properties over time, you are not reinvesting it as efficiently as you can. And so instead of using cash on cash return, I would argue you should use a different metric called return on equity, which is basically the same thing. But instead of using cash for one side of the equation, you use equity. So in the same equation, let's go back here and say, what equity do we have in the deal at the time of purchase? And it's 50K, right? That's all the money we have invested. So our ROE also equals 10%, right? Because we took our 5K in cash flow divided by 50K in equity, and that gives us 10%. And that's the critical thing here, is that your equity and your cash invested at the point of purchase are exactly the same. And that's why cash on cash return works at the point of purchase. Now we need to take our 6,000, remember that's what we now are generating in cash flow, and we divide it by 88K, which is what we have invested into the deal. Because again, if we sold it, that's what we could pull out. That's the money that we have to be thinking about. So if you divide 6 by 88, you get a, 6.8% return on equity. So your return on equity is going down. Remember, it was 10% at the time of purchase, 6.8% 3 years from now, and that's not great. And it's not a bad thing that this is going down. It means that you have more money invested in the deal, which means you are profiting, which is great. But it means that you have to be thinking about how can I take that money, that 88K, and use it more efficiently? Because as we just demonstrated, if you used your 88K and got a 10% cash on cash return, like you can, you should be earning 8,800 in cash flow and not 6,000 in cash flow.
So again, letting him finish his thought, finish his point up. I agree with him. In fact, that's why I'm actually taking out a home equity line of credit on my duplex. I have $220,000 of equity, or excuse me, $240,000 of equity in this duplex. And I'm taking out a home equity line of credit for half of that. I don't want to risk the whole 100% of my equity, nor would any bank allow me to borrow that much anyways. But I'm only going to take 50%, $120,000 that I can play with. And I purchased in the Midwest where it's significantly cheaper than $200,000. The last 5-6 houses that I bought were ranged anywhere between $34,000 up to $90,000 in that range. I bought a bunch of houses in there. And so, I agree, putting your equity to work. However, again, I don't think that's for the beginning real estate investor. I think you're really putting yourself at risk if you do not at least mention, hey, if you're on rental 1, 2, or 3, you've been doing this for 2 years, you happen to buy in a market that just flew off the rails with all of the inflation and all the other stuff we got going on. I'm happy for you. That's fantastic. But maybe just pump the brakes a little bit there, slow it down just a skosh, and sit on that equity for a little while and keep learning the game. Buy a couple more, get your own cash flow going, and then if you want to take more of an advanced strategy, at that point, go for it. Let's go ahead and let him finish his video.
So in these situations where you have too much equity in your house and you're not efficiently generating cash flow with it, you have two options. You can either sell, so you could just sell it, take your 88K, and go invest that into a new property, or you can do a cash out refi. And I've made
Okay, so I do agree with him that cash out refi, which he's about to explain, I wouldn't sell. There's one common theme that I've noticed from speaking to the hundreds of real estate investors that I've spoken with at this point, and it's that everybody always says the same thing. Man, I wish I hadn't have sold that property 4 or 5 years ago. It'd be worth double now. I mean, that is a common thread from everyone I talk to. I can't see myself selling anything unless it was to do a 1031 exchange so I could buy apartment buildings. But man, everyone I talk to, man, I was still kicking myself for selling that one. Man, I wish I hadn't sold that one. It's just very hard for me to sell. So I understand when he's talking about a cash out refi. However, he doesn't mention a home equity line of credit. Just pull a line of credit on the house. Not quite as easy to work with as the cash out refinance, where you can just get the money untouched, other than you had to pay to refinance the loan, your closing costs, whatever. But home equity line of credit is a great option as well, which is what I'm doing.
Full video about this, I'll link to it in the description below, but just quickly showing you how you do a cash out refi. Your property is worth $250, right? Whoa, that was really bad writing. It was worth $250. You still owe. So basically, when you do a cash out refi, you are starting the mortgage again. So the property is worth $250, and you're going to put 20% down again. Again, you probably have to put 25% down. I'm going to use nice round numbers. So let's say you put 20% down again, and so you need to keep $50K in the deal. That's 20% of $250. So that means that you're taking out a loan. Your new mortgage is going to be worth $200K, right? But you owe the bank $150, right? You have to pay off your first mortgage, and that's going to get you a $50K refi, right? So that means that doing this cash out refi, you're going to walk away with 50, and there's probably going to be, closing costs. So let's just say it's 45K. But you can stay and own that original house, and you can now pull out 45,000 to go reinvest somewhere else. So that's the basics of this. If you want to.
Okay. So he's right. You can refinance at that better loan. But what we have right now going on is the fact that because we've experienced record low interest rates, and interest rates have been mostly falling for the last several years, it puts us in a situation where this advice makes sense today, but it might not make sense tomorrow. In a rising interest rate environment where you're no longer going to get a lower rate to help keep your payment the same or lower, when you pull that money out and you take his original loan, which was $160,000, and now he's creating a $200,000 mortgage, well, even if the interest rates are the same, you've created a higher payment for yourself, a monthly payment for that mortgage. So unless your rents have risen to the point where they can also cover that same that new mortgage payment that could be more costly, this could be a very bad strategy, because let's say your rents went up $100 a month, but you refinance, now your payment went up $120 a month. Now you're actually making less monthly cash flow than you were before. Yes, you're using your equity in a more efficient manner. However, you're unable to service your loan with the rent that you're bringing in, potentially, right? Potentially. Obviously, the numbers, you'd have to play with it in your own particular situation. But it's just something to be cognizant about. If rates are going up, or if you're taking a larger loan, very likely you're going to have a more expensive mortgage payment. So hopefully your rent is growing alongside it. If not, this may not be a good strategy.
this. If you want to learn more about how to pull off the cash out refi, you can watch my other video, link below. But I hope that what you're taking away from this video today is how to think about your profits as an investor. Because if you sit there and say, my property is getting more and more valuable, my cash on cash return is getting better, those things are true. But you are also missing the bigger point, which is that you now have more money with which to invest. And you need to be thinking about how to maximize the return on all of that profit that you have successfully generated. If I were you, my recommendation is once you purchase something, no longer think about cash on cash return, and instead turn to return on equity as a better metric to measure the performance of your portfolio.
Okay, so, I mean, I think it's just a difference of opinion. I don't think he said anything that's wrong. I don't think he gave any bad advice. I don't think he was being irresponsible. He seems like a nice guy, friendly guy, definitely knows what he's talking about. I completely agree with his assessment of wanting to put your equity to better use rather than just leave it sitting in a house. He presented his idea for what he thought was the best metric to measure the return on a rental property after purchasing it. I still think cash on cash return is great, especially for those first few years. Be very careful about creating a negative cash flowing property, an alligator property. If you're a new real estate investor, take your time. You don't have to rush into things. I know it sucks to see people posting, oh, I bought my 9th rental this year. Yeah, believe me, I get it. I feel the sting and the pressure to do better and do more and be better myself on a daily basis, and it frustrates me to no end that I don't have 100 rentals yet. But I'll get there one day. I'm just going to try to do it as safely and responsibly as I possibly can. Guys, I really appreciate you watching the video. Hopefully it was beneficial. If you got any questions for me, leave them down in the comments below. If you like this guy's strategy, let him know. I'm going to put a link to his video in the description down below, and we'll catch you next time.